She made a campaign promise.
By the end of my first term, we will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals that are affordable for the middle class.
Kamala Harris has officially kicked off her presidential campaign, and she's putting housing affordability front and center, promising to build 3 million new homes. This wouldn't be the first time a politician made a lofty promise to sway public opinion without a real plan to deliver. It's an ambitious goal, but she's betting it'll resonate with voters who are feeling the squeeze, without regard to the reality or the intention of pulling it off. The promise reminds me of Obama's Affordable Care Act's Keep Your Doctor promise.
And that means that no matter how we reform healthcare, we will keep this promise to the American people. If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period.
And I'm not picking on the left. George H.W. Bush famously promised, "Read my lips, no new taxes." You remember that?
My opponent won't rule out raising taxes, but I will, and the Congress will push me to raise taxes, and I'll say no. And they'll push, and I'll say no. And they'll push again, and I'll say to them, "Read my lips, no new taxes."
If you don't know the history, both of those promises, midterm, were canceled. Kamala's gamble is likely to pay off though, like it did for Obama and Bush, which is why politicians always make audacious promises during elections. But there are some uncomfortable truths about affordable housing promises, Kamala's promise in particular, that nobody has yet to bring up, that you need to hear before Election Day. For example, does it make sense to build 3 million new homes to solve the U.S. housing affordability crisis while simultaneously building additional demand out of undocumented immigrants and giving them free money to buy those new homes? It's on the table. And here's what we're dealing with. Kamala Harris is focused on housing. That's a big deal. Not to mention smart, because let's face it, housing has become a nightmare for so many people. Prices are skyrocketing, and finding an affordable place to live seems impossible for just too many families. Harris is promising to change that. And she's not just talking the talk, she says she's got a plan. Here's the meat of it. Harris is calling out corporate landlords who are buying up houses by the dozen, making it more difficult for regular folks to buy a decent home. These companies then rent them out at extremely high prices, her words, which is subjective, and that kind of gives you a clue as to who she's pandering to. But she paints these corporations, who ironically are her biggest donors, as part of the problem because they're increasingly controlling the supply. On the flip side, Trump is taking a different approach. He's tying housing issues to illegal immigration that's driving up demand. Historically, probably not the strongest argument, but with open borders, his position has legs. And then there's this to consider: the reality of California's move just last week, which approved a bill to extend home mortgage aid to undocumented immigrants. Elon Musk chimed in with a post on his social platform X that half of Earth should move to California, given all the incentives to do so. This bill, the California Dream for All program, in one sense, it reminds me of the $150,000 of 0% interest capital Chase has made available for real estate investors and business owners. If you have a 680 credit score or better, no collections or bankruptcies in the last 7 years, you can get instant approval at nocostcapital.com. But this California Dream for All program, it too offers no interest loans up to $150,000 to cover down payments and fees, but to undocumented immigrants. And it's unclear right now if a credit score is even needed. I mean, how many undocumented immigrants have one? Details still to be revealed, but what we do know is these loans don't accrue interest or require monthly payments. Considering California Governor Gavin Newsom and Vice President Kamala sit on the same side of the aisle, it's not crazy to think that this program could go national if she's elected. For example, in 2006, Massachusetts passed a comprehensive healthcare reform law under Governor Mitt Romney. The law mandated that all residents have health insurance. At the time, this approach was seen by many as a bold and potentially risky experiment in healthcare reform. It was this state-level healthcare reform that became the blueprint for the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, which was signed into law in 2010. 20 million people instantly had health care, but then made it unaffordable for 20 million different people. So did it really serve the American people? The point here is there's precedent for a crazy state bill to go national. So if history were to repeat itself, how does this math serve Americans? To construct 3 million homes to tackle the housing affordability issue, while at the same time creating more demand by providing undocumented immigrants with incentives and financial support to fill them. The program would overshadow natural citizens, not to mention documented immigrants who are really having difficulty themselves. People who have followed all the rules are going to have to compete for these new homes with those that didn't. A program like this would kill the incentive to become legal. It's not rocket science. If you're giving out free stuff along with free money, more illegal immigrants will come. I mean, who wouldn't sign up for that program? The reality is that this is just a California thing for now, but is it unimaginable that it could go national if the wrong people ended up in the right seats? You can't say no because it's happened before. Trump is also accusing Harris of wanting to destroy the suburbs by pushing for more apartments and condos in suburban areas, calling it a war on the suburbs. It's a stark contrast to Harris' approach and highlights the clear divide in how each candidate views the housing crisis. Now, the uncomfortable truths nobody is talking about, and there are many of them. The first one that stands out, 3 million. It's a big number, depending on the perspective you view it through. If you consider the bureaucracy involved, it's a huge number because the government isn't exactly known for speed. Even if Kamala's administration committed to building these homes, the red tape, zoning issues, and endless bureaucratic delays will slow the process down to a crawl. I mean, if you've ever built or did a major rehab on a house before, you know what I'm talking about. Now multiply that by 3 million. Exactly. 3 million homes is a ginormous number. But in the context of the housing crisis we're in, would it even move the needle? You see, the housing market itself is enormous. As of 2023, there are approximately 140 million housing units in the country. Adding 3 million homes increases the total housing inventory by just barely over 2%. Now, it's not that big of a number, is it? And when you consider that illegal border crossings have surpassed 12.5 million since Biden-Harris took office, it's barely a drop in the bucket. And then there's this. The real estate mantra is location, location, location. Even if 3 million homes were built, where they're built matters a lot. I mean, if they're not in the areas with the highest demand, like major cities or growing suburbs, then they won't relieve the real pressure in the market at all. Face it, the government isn't going to build these affordable homes in downtown Los Angeles, New York, or Miami. They'll build where land is cheap and available. And those may not be places where people actually want or need to live. So there's a good possibility you'll see a glut of homes in less desirable areas, while the desirable markets remain unaffordable. Now, let's say this assumption is wrong, and I'm just totally crazy, and these homes are built in high demand areas. Well, now basic economics comes into play. While an increase in supply might initially put some downward pressure on prices, the market has a way of adjusting, and it will. Developers, investors, and even homeowners would respond to a sudden increase in inventory by adjusting their prices, holding back building new units, and selling what they do have until the market stabilizes. The prices, they might dip slightly, but they'd return to where the market demand keeps them. The idea that 3 million homes will suddenly make housing affordable really overlooks the complexity of the market. Exactly what you would expect from someone who's never run a business or even worked in the private sector. Prices are driven by a myriad of factors beyond just supply, including interest rates, income levels, and demand. Prices will adjust to meet what the market can bear, as it has done, and as it has us where we are today. The promise to build 3 million homes doesn't guarantee they'll be high quality or truly affordable either. I mean, if you've ever lived in government housing, you know what I mean. Trust me, you really don't want the government building homes. Government projects often face cost overruns and compromises in quality. I mean, think Boston's Big Dig project, a massive infrastructure project in Boston, Massachusetts, designed to reroute the city's central artery highway underground. Initially projected to cost $2.8 billion, the final cost ballooned to over $14.6 billion. And the project faced numerous issues, including leaks, ceiling collapses, and defective materials. The compromises on quality led to ongoing maintenance issues long after the project was completed. And then there's California's high-speed rail, which aimed to create a high-speed rail system connecting major cities in California, like Los Angeles to San Francisco. The project was approved on November 4th, 2008, but didn't begin construction until more than 6 years later, January 6th, 2015. Originally estimated at $33 billion, the cost has since soared to over $100 billion, with significant delays. And here we are 9 years later, it's still not done due to challenges in land acquisition, engineering, and construction. And now the debate is around whether they should even try to finish it. And then there's the healthcare.gov rollout. The website was created to facilitate the implementation of the Affordable Care Act. The project cost was initially estimated at $93 million, but ended up costing more than $2 billion to build a website. And then there's the Pentagon's F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. I won't go into it. You get the point, right? That building 3 million homes by the end of a presidential term is an improbable task for the government. They're just not good at this type of stuff. If they were successful, though, the term affordable is relative. The Affordable Health Care Act, that comes to mind again. What the government deems affordable for some may still be out of reach for the average person. And this is especially true for real estate in high-demand areas. Flooding the market with government-built homes could destabilize the housing market. It could discourage private developers from building new homes or maintaining existing ones, knowing that they can't compete with government-subsidized prices. We've already seen very recently that private developers couldn't compete because of the prices caused by a disruption in the supply chain. They pulled back. Another disruption in the free economy will lead to a drop in overall housing quality and numbers as private investment dries up. That's what we call an unintended consequence. This is what happens when a simple system tries to regulate a complex system. If the government were to build and subsidize these 3 million homes, the unintended consequences could be significant and varied and wide and far-reaching. Like 1, depressing property values. Flooding the market with government-built homes could lead to a housing surplus in certain areas. This could drive down property values for existing homeowners, negatively impacting their equity and wealth. Or 2, quality and maintenance issues. Rapidly constructed, mass-produced homes could suffer from lower quality, leading to higher maintenance costs and potentially creating entire neighborhoods of poorly built housing. This could lead, as it has done before, to long-term infrastructure problems and increased government spending on repairs. Or 3, social segregation. Concentrating affordable housing in specific areas could lead to social segregation, where low-income families are clustered together in certain neighborhoods, potentially exacerbating social inequalities and limiting economic mobility. Or 4, the strain on local services. An influx of new residents in areas where these homes are built could strain local services like schools, healthcare, and transportation, leading to overcrowding and a decline in service quality. And those are just some of the things that I can think of. But in reality, the unintended consequences of simple actions like this end up being far worse than what anyone could have anticipated. We have recent proof of that time and time again during the pandemic. In essence, while the intention behind building 3 million homes might be to solve the housing crisis, the reality could be a mix of positive and negative outcomes, with some potentially severe unintended consequences that could undermine the original goal, holding back the whole movement. But here's what we actually know. The housing crisis isn't just about the number of homes. It's about the cost of labor, mass illegal immigration, the supply chain, and policies that restrict supply, such as zoning laws and building regulations. Instead of addressing these root causes, the government is slapping on a Band-Aid, one with a weak adhesive, where the primary motivation is to win an election. But without fixing the underlying issues, the crisis will persist. And then, where does the money come from? Taxpayers, they're going to foot the bill for this massive construction project. And with government projects notoriously going over budget, there's a real risk of higher taxes or cuts to other essential services to fund this housing boom. The promise to build 3 million homes, it's a flashy headline. But in reality, it's a superficial solution that doesn't address the deeper issues in the housing market. It's more about political points than practical implementation or impact. And when the dust settles, we're looking at another empty promise that leaves us right where we started. Now, if you're in real estate, especially as a private investor, here's where the opportunities lie. With Harris pushing for new construction and Trump focusing on the suburbs, there's potential for significant shifts in the market, whether it's getting ahead of the demand for affordable housing in urban areas or capitalizing on suburban developments. Understanding these political moves could give you an edge in your investments. The savvy investor would listen to everything that I just said and ignore the politics, ignore the ideologies, ignore all of that stuff altogether, and walk away knowing that there is and will be for a very long time massive demand for affordable housing. Precisely the type of housing you can find at cashflowsavvy.com. So here's my advice. Set your emotions aside. Elections tend to bring out the worst of them in all of us. But when it comes to investing, there's no room for emotions. It's just logic and math. So pay close attention to how this unfolds. The housing market is about to get a lot more interesting. And as a private investor, there's a lot to gain if you're strategic about where you put your money. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.